Oh, hello. I just got tagged by Seagulls Gather, who in turn had been tagged by that guy from C-Type Alpha 5 on a My Film collection theme. And I'm assuming the expectation is I pitch in and rattle off a similar video. Now, I can't even begin to show you the boxes of, I suppose, is rather obsolete media that I have in my possession. There's too much and I still use it. I'm still dependent on it. If you know a streaming source that would kind of fit my tastes, then I'm all ears. But for the moment, yeah, I still have boxes and shelves. So I'm only. I thought, well, I'll just pull out a small random sample, some of which I've not even watched yet. So the first thing I pulled out, this was I think a 2010 film by, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Sionsono, Cold Fish, which supposedly is based on true events, case of serial killers out in Japan. So this film is an unusual mix of murder, mayhem, mutilation, I'm running out of M's, yakuzas and tropical fish dealerships. What a winning combination. How can I say no to that? It is really gory. But I suppose not in that gratuitous sense that if you watch something like Tokyo Gore Police or something like this, not that sort of gory, but it's messy and gets unpleasant. And it's sort of, it came 10 years after, I suppose, that, or longer than that, even that sort of famous wave of Japanese horror that we had. It's sort of like, maybe a sort of late arrival to that boom, but worth a look if you're into that Japanese horror stuff. Next up, a friend recommended this to me the other week. We were talking about the film Villain, of which there is a book, which I actually, long-winded way of saying I'm going to get around to doing something on the book that the film Villain was based on, but in that genre of kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, that 70s, slightly noirish British crime, although they're colour films, I think of them as noirish. Get Carter and things like this. This film came up and a friend recommended it to me. I'm only aware of it by reputation. It's still in its shiny, clean film, so I'm saving this up. Sean Connery, directed by, Trevor Howard's in it as well, directed by Sidney Lumet. I gather it's going to be dark, but I'll get to this shortly. In any case, next, I know very little about this film. I just bought it because I think I saw a preview of it somewhere and thought, well, that might be interesting, but I still haven't watched it. It was slightly reduced in FOP a little while back, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. We'll see. Next, Cobra Verde by Werner Herzog featuring Klaus Kinski. You'll be surprised to hear playing a fucking madman. Yeah, I've seen a few of their notorious collaborations. The one I'm a big fan of is Aguirre, the Wrath of God, if you've ever seen that. But this one, I didn't know much about it until I think it was about this time last year. I was out in Porthmadog in North Wales, and they have quite a good record shop there. For the small town that it is, the record shop there, Cobb Record, is really good. And they had a copy of the soundtrack to this by Popol Vuh. I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think this was 80s actually, 87ish. And the Popol Vuh had also scored Aguirre, the Wrath of God. So, just on impulse, I picked that up, and it's a really good soundtrack. So, naturally, I thought, well, I better see the film. So it it's based on a book which I haven't read yet. Final collaboration between Herzog and Kinski. I would imagine they probably fucking hated each other by this point. But the remarkable tale of Francisco Manuel da Silva, the flamboyant 19th century Brazilian bandit known as Cobra Verde, when the owner of a sugar plantation unknowingly hires the barefoot gun-toting thief to keep his slaves in check, he gets more than he bargained for as Cobra Verde, in short order, impregnates all of his boss's daughters. I forget how many there are. I think it's about 5 maybe. In revenge, he is sent on an impossible and deadly mission to sail to the west coast of Africa and reopen the slave trade. Not only does he succeed in this, he goes on to lead an unstoppable army of women in a savage war against the local king. So it's one of those tales of utter madness and colonialist exploitation in a overheated tropical setting. Pretty good. I mean, I can't imagine it was an easy process filming it, knowing the kind of nature of the relationship between the director and the star. But, and of course, Klinsky looks, I mean, he's not acting crazy in these things, is he? He is seriously deranged. But anyway, sort of interested in seeking the book out that this is based on. And talking of historical unpleasantness, I don't know if this really made much of a dent on the UK market. Der Hauptmann, or The Captain, by Robert Schwentke. I think this was about 4 or 5 years ago. As it turned out, I couldn't even pin down a disc with an English dub or English subtitles. So with my next to non-existent German, I just had to sort of, I mean, you sort of figure it's fairly obvious what's going on in this. It is obviously a war film set right in the closing weeks of the Second World War in Germany. It's based on a true story. It's based on the case of, I think his name was Willy Herold, and he was, I think he was an ex-paratrooper his previous military service hadn't seemingly given much warning that he was capable of the sort of behaviour that he got into during these weeks, but I think there'd been a few telltale signs that he had a few kind of Walter Mitty-ish tendencies. But what happened was he got separated in those closing weeks. Like many people, he got separated from his unit, was in danger, I suppose, of being rounded up by the authorities as a deserter. So he happens somewhere in the North German countryside. I think it's the area that colloquially is known as, sometimes referred to as Mofrika. I think this was originally going to be called the King of Mofrika. I think it's where Germany kind of borders with Holland, if I've got this right. So it's flat and quite rural for big stretches of it. So he happens, while he's wandering, he comes across an abandoned car, and in the back seat of that car there's a suitcase which has a Luftwaffe captain's uniform. Now the scene is recreated in here, very, very powerfully. You see him, to coin an expression, trying it on for size, and he likes the feeling it gives him. He likes the feeling a nice smart captain's uniform gives him, and pretty soon he learns the reaction he's going to get from people when he's in that uniform. And he likes the feeling he gets from that as well, and he decides to roll with this, and he decides to explore the situation further, and he ends up on this kind of almost brigand-like rampage across that bit of the countryside, and he's largely unchallenged. His authority seems to just be accepted everywhere he goes, even though he's in reality only I think he's a corporal or something. And this leads to this kind of reign of terror while it lasts. The last thing Europe would have needed at that point. Oh yeah, more abomination, more. But the unusual aspect of there's a lot of war films and a lot of recounting of atrocities of this time. This case is slightly unusual in that it wasn't state endorsed by Germany. This was someone going rogue, and in fact it's the German military police who are usually kind of not the good guys in these stories, but it's actually them who eventually succeed in bringing him to heel and sort of stopping his activities, although he does a bunk from them as well. So it's extraordinarily disturbing. I wouldn't advise casual viewing. You need to know what you're getting into with this. It's deeply unsettling. Also, one you have to watch it right to the end. I don't want to give too much away, but if you do pick this up, you need to get right to the end of the credits, because they do some quite interesting stuff even then. So yeah, it's a bit of an unknown one, and I don't think it's sort of really got much reaction in this country, but it's really worth a look if you feel you have the stomach, because it's not an easy view at all. Anyway, last up, Light Relief, I suppose. This used to come on late at night when you know, usually on Friday night at 1 o'clock when you're drunk from the pub, and that's kind of the headspace you want to be in to watch Psychomania. Sometimes the Death Wheelers in some markets, I believe. It's a deeply, deeply silly 70s trash-exploitation horror. Undead Bikers. Oh, you may well have seen this already. A great soundtrack album, actually. I think Trunk Records put out the soundtrack some years ago. It's this kind of meld of 70s soundtrack type of things, and sort of that, I suppose, a recreation of biker rock and the odd daft folk ditty, including the funeral song, you know, when they bury him before he roars back as the undead. He's buried on his bike like that, and these hippie biker types are kind of sprawled around the field with acoustic guitars, and they do this ludicrous song, Riding Free, which is worth the price of admission alone. But yeah, this is just one of those really fucking silly, but I wouldn't want to be without it. I do visit it fairly often as well. So it also includes frog worship. There's all this kind of occult stuff. Actually, it's toads. Jesus, this is getting a bit League of Gentlemen, isn't it? I think they're toads. Anyway, they worship an amphibian. It's their portal to, I don't fucking know. There's some good standing stones in it as well, which I think are real. Forget where they're located. I'll probably pay a pilgrimage to it one day. Anyway, so that's that. Maybe I'll do a part 2. I don't know. This is just a very small selection. But anyway, thank you for tagging me, Seagulls Gather, and I'll be scripting something book related quite soon.